Welcome back, third grade scientists. Today we will review the vocabulary words that you will encounter in your lessons for this week on the human senses and movement. So let's get going. We will review together the academic and content vocabulary for this unit of study. We will study the word meanings, look at examples to help you understand the work you will be doing during your science lessons this week. Let's go. Remember, we will review both academic and content vocabulary. Academic are the words that you can find across all subject areas in school, and they usually appear in the focuses and questions for the lessons. Your content words will have to do with the human senses and movement. Let's look at some academic vocabulary. One of your lesson focuses or questions for this week is, how do nerves support senses and movement? You notice that the word support is highlighted in red. Let's stop and think about that word. Have you ever heard this word before? Can you picture an example in your mind of what support looks like? Can you think of any other examples? If you try to explain the word support to somebody else, could you do it? Stop and think for one moment. Okay, so support is a verb or an action word. It means to hold up or to provide enough for. In other words, for something to happen, it needs this support or it needs to be held up by something else in order to facilitate it working. So, for example, look at this table. If I asked you, how is this table supported? In other words, how is it able to stand up high enough in order for people to use it as a place to put something down or to sit at? What would you say? What is the support for this table? If you said, well, the support is the four legs, without all four legs stable and working, this table would not be able to stand up, you would be correct. So the legs of a table are an example of a support. Content vocabulary. Let's take a look at some of the important content words for this week's lessons. These are some words that you will learn about during your lessons this week. You will have the word impulse, adaptive, impaired, and you will have to decide between the difference between voluntary and involuntary. How are they opposites and what do they mean? So before we move on to look at the examples and the meanings of these words, can you think of any examples or meanings for these words? Have you ever heard them before, used them before? Where have you seen or read about them? Are there any words that really seem brand new to you and you have no idea what they mean? Okay, let's take a look. Our first word is impulse. An impulse is a noun. Impulses are signals of information to and from the brain. For example, if your brain received a signal that something was extremely hot, like this stove, see those hot coils? If you touch them by accident, your brain would receive that signal and the impulse would happen instantly to make you move your hand away very quickly so as not to get injured. That impulse is really important to your safety. Without it, it may take even longer for you to pull your hand away if you had to think about it, and you could get injured. So that impulse keeps you safe. Voluntary and involuntary are adjectives or describing words. Something that's voluntary is an act that's done from or done by choice. In other words, you have to stop, think about it, and make a choice to do it. But involuntary is the opposite of that. It means it's not caused by your own choice, your own will, or your own wish. You don't even think about it, it just happens. Our body needs both voluntary and involuntary reactions in order to keep us safe and healthy. For example, If the weather was extremely cold outside and you wanted to protect yourself from the cold, you might think about how you're going to dress to keep yourself warm. So you would think to put on a hat, a scarf, warm clothing. Those are all voluntary reactions. You're thinking about what you need to do for protection and you're acting by choice. You're choosing to put the hat on, to put the scarf on. That's not something that your body can do by itself. It needs you to make that choice and decision. But if there was dust or something in the air that got into your eye, an involuntary reaction to protect your eye would be blinking. Lots of times, and most of the time, you do not even think about blinking. It's an involuntary reaction that your body does in order to protect the eye and keep it safe from debris or injury. So blinking is an involuntary action and putting on your hat and scarf is a voluntary action. Adaptive. Adaptive is also an adjective. Adaptive describes something that has been changed for a particular use. For example, this keyboard is an example of adaptive technology. What adaptation do you notice with that keyboard and why do you think it was developed? If you said that you noticed that they adapted the keyboard by adding this braille keyboard at the bottom for somebody who had difficulty with their eyesight and needed to feel the letters instead of seeing them, you would be correct. Making a small change to this keyboard to help somebody who had difficulty with their sight is an adaptive technology. Impair. Impair is a verb or an action word. Impair means to lessen the strength or ability of. If someone had less strength in their eyes and their vision was impaired or they were not able to see well, what might they use to help them see better? If you said these eyeglasses, you would be correct. Eyeglasses are a way to help with a visual impairment. Well, these are some awesome words for this week around the human senses and body and movement. And I hope you have a great time learning about the human body, senses, and movement this week, and that this vocabulary review will help you with your lessons. Keep up the great work, third grade scientists.